Hello, everyone. I'm here to talk, briefly run over the history of the Dala horse. And my grandpa was born in Norway, and his father was born in Norway. His father's father was born in Norway, and his father's father's father was born in Norway, and his father's 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 father was born in Norway. And then all of their mothers were born in Norway for who knows how many generations back. Could be thousands of years. But the Dala horse is a. I'm making a Dala horse right now, and I'm making some tiled Dala horses, and it's a traditionally it's kind of the unofficial kind of a symbol of Sweden. If you go, for instance, if you ever fly to Scandinavia and you land in the Copenhagen Airport, in the tourist shops there, you'll see tons and tons of Dala horses, and they're brightly painted, colorful horses. A lot of times they're brought out during the holiday, during Christmas time, Yule. And another thing that you'll see a lot of times, you'll see straw goats and straw angels, which is another kind of more Swedish kind of tradition. You might be. Norway has a long history of there's kind of a bittersweet kind of love-hate relationship between Norway and Sweden. It dates back to the 1660s, so it's still kind of joked about. Here in the United States, we don't have much of a way of kind of understanding it. For instance, well, we do have the North and the South. During the Civil War, our country fought against each other. So, I don't think as an American many people think much about that at all anymore. I'm sure maybe they do it's a little bit more. I don't know. Maybe in the Deep South, they're more kind of historically lined with their history, kind of with being part of the Confederacy, but it's not really like what's going on with Sweden and Norway. In the 1660s, the Swedish Empire kind of tried to take over Norway. They were defeated. Denmark then kind of took over Norway. You see, Norway is this very unique country where it'd be very difficult to ever try to take over Norway because it's full of these fjords and these little villages and towns on islands and mountain valleys, and it's just so long and narrow and spread out. It's become its own country through the hundreds of years because of its. I believe a big part of it is because of its geographical kind of. Just its natural geographical environment makes it extremely difficult for anyone to try to take it over. I mean, people will just go in the next valley, and to try to move armies through mountains like that has got to be nearly impossible. But the Dala horse was created in the 1900s in Sweden. It was basically like a child's toy. It's some people. There's a region of Sweden that it's named after. I think it's Dalinia, and some people in the woods that had children. They carved these wooden horses for presents. I think for Christmas time, for Yule, and it became a traditional Norwegian type of, or Swedish. It became a Swedish kind of tradition. And then a lot of times, if you ever hear Norwegians talk about Swedes, there's lots of jokes about Norwegians and Swedes, kind of like how people joke about all kinds of nationalities sometimes. I don't know if it's joked about as much anymore. Norway has some of its own traditions that are more artistic, like the rose mauling, which I've several times I've posted lots of rose mauling antiques. Just right before I came back here to the U.S., I bought probably about 20 really beautiful rose mauling bowls from the Hardanger region, from Hordaland, at an antique shop. I didn't get a chance to post pictures of them, but so the rose mauling is something that I haven't had a chance to really create any rose mauling yet, because the ceramic artwork is a little different than the painting. So also the rose mauling isn't necessarily a holiday kind of a thing. It's more of a kind of a universal kind of artwork that you'd see wooden bowls and furniture in Norway. So I could really start doing that at any time, but I don't work with wood, and I haven't really, um, you know, I haven't had a chance to experiment with doing that on tile work, which I will do. Um, so the Dala horse comes from Sweden, and you might hear people wondering why, if I have a Norwegian flag out, why I have the Dala horse there. Well, um, when you're in Norway, it's not unusual to see a Dala horse in someone's window, having one standing in someone's window, or just to see one as you're traveling through Norway. I've seen several. So uh, so the Dala horse, and there's a lot of Swedes that move into Norway. People get married to Swedes, and Norwegians and Swedish will marry. Um, right before I left, well, not right before I left Oda, but um, a month ago, I met a Swedish lady and her Canadian boyfriend. I don't know if they're married yet or not, but they were living in Oda, and so it's you'll hear. In fact, I hear more Americans with Norwegian heritage joke about the love-hate relationship with Swedes, more so than I would ever hear Norwegians. Um, I think Americans, a lot of them have never even been to Norway, and they don't even really understand anything about Norway, but they know some like kind of fables about Norway, so they end up thinking those things, but they've never gone to really experience it. Um, Granted, the Dala horse is not traditionally at all Norwegian, and you don't see nearly as many Dala horses as you see trolls. Trolls, I think, are much more Norwegian. Rose mauling is much more Norwegian. I have a whole series of troll tiles I'm about ready to glaze, so those will be coming out soon. Also, um, for my personal family history, my grandpa was born in Norway. His father was born in Norway. His father's father was born in Norway. His father's father's father was born in Norway. His father's 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 father was born in Norway. And then they all married Norwegian women who knows how far back their Norwegian heritage went. So that's extensive Norwegian heritage. So you might be wondering, why am I making a Dala horse? Couple reasons. When my grandpa was in his late teens, both his parents died like 2 or 3 years apart, and my grandpa was the oldest son of a family of seven, and he was sent along with a couple of his brothers and along with a couple of his siblings. He was sent to his uncle. So one of his father's sisters married a Swedish man who owned Stanvik Steel. You may have heard of that before. Stanvik Steel. I think it's one of the largest steel companies in the world now. So my grandpa's Uncle Freddie, they called him, owned this huge steel company in Sweden, and my grandpa was sent there. And my grandpa's Uncle Freddie, who owned the steel company in Sweden, he sent my grandpa to the universities to learn engineering. So and this was before World War II. So there were several years there that my grandpa spent in Sweden. He after World War II, he worked for the company Stanvik Steel, and he lived in Sweden. And he met my grandma in the United States when he was there on business, and they actually got married in Sweden, and had my dad's sister was born in Sweden. So I have this Swedish heritage where my grandpa was kind of rescued, nurtured by his Uncle Freddie, sent away to sent to school, paid for. So I can't deny that I have to be fortunate that Sweden came to my grandpa's rescue and his brothers and sisters' rescue when both their parents died. This happened, I think, in the 1930s. So it was like right near. I think there was a really bad depression in the 1930s throughout Europe. So it was the Spork family beverage company, I think, went out of business, and then my grandpa's parents died during all of this. So this is why they were sent to Sweden. And when my grandpa's family came, they were had a very prestigious Trondheimsman family man of Trondheim who's well known, is in the museum. But this tragedy happened, and my grandpa was sent to Sweden. So I have a Swedish heritage that, like I said, I can't deny it. And another interesting thing is in Oda. Oda was a farming community up until like the early 1900s, late 1800s. It was just a very kind of rural farming community, surrounded by just beautiful scenery. Many tourists from Europe would travel on ships to Oda and get out and ride carriages up to the waterfalls and camp and come back, and they would just enjoy the traveling through the fjords in the summertime, seeing the beautiful mountains and glaciers, and it wasn't until the early 1900s when the Swedish engineer came, and he harnessed bought a lot of the land around where the waterfalls were and made hydroelectric power plants in Oda, Tisidal. There's a museum there now called the Vastcraft Museum of Hydropower and Industry, and it changed Oda forever. Many Swedish workers came and then populated Oda, and so when I was cleaning out my building, it was full of Swedish parts and equipment from the 1930s even. Sweden, Oda has a population that's has much more Swedish influence than kind of maybe many traditionally kind of Norwegian towns. So it's another reason why I feel a connection to Oda, and it's another reason why the Dala horse is kind of it's a fun thing to make. Kind of it's some Norwegians might joke about it, not approve of it. But it's a common thing that it's not unusual to see a Dala horse in Norway, but it definitely is a Swedish symbol of Sweden. So there are a lot of Swedish immigrants in this area of Michigan, in Leelanau County where I live. So it's not unusual.